Hi, it's Giffen Lobates here, and today I want to talk about NFTs for content creators. Now, I have to add here that I hate the term content as used to describe artwork or music or things like that, but it's the word that's used in the industry. I personally prefer to think of people as a writer or a composer or a photographer, but content creator it is apparently. And in this video, I'm going to go through the three components that are needed to make an NFT. And in fact, only one of those three components is an NFT. And by the time I finish talking, you should have an understanding as to why terms such as let's turn this artwork into an NFT aren't actually very meaningful, or rather, they're rather misleading. So I'm going to start off with the first of the three components, which you should be very familiar with because it's the digital file that encompasses your artwork. So for example, if you're an artist, you may paint something on a canvas and then take a digital photograph of it, and now you have a JPEG. You have a digital file, and it's a file that you can open up in a browser and have a look at. And of course, once you've got your digital file, you're going to put it online so that the world can see it. Now, the interesting thing is that if you have a digital image and you put it on the internet, then you still maintain copyright over it. You're giving people permission to download it into their browser and have a look at it, but copyright law in pretty much every significant country on the planet ensures that you maintain the rights to your artwork, and people can't download it and start printing t-shirts with your art on it or things like that. Of course, defending copyright infringement can be expensive, but that's a topic for a different video. Anyway, you've got your piece of art, you have your JPEG. Now, the interesting thing about these kinds of file formats, such as JPEGs and PNGs and movie files and stuff like that, is that they often contain extra data that is not displayed to the user or the consumer of your artwork, the person who goes and looks at it. And this metadata contains information about the picture. For example, if you take a photograph with a camera, then the camera will write extra information into the JPEG file, specifying the make of the camera, maybe some of the lens settings, even possibly the location at which it was taken. And similarly, you as an artist using an art package like Photoshop or the GIMP on Linux can add information to your JPEG stating that you're the author of the picture and adding a title and things like that to it. So that's the first component needed in creating an NFT, something that the end user is going to look at or listen to or whatever media format it is. But it has to be digital at this stage. The second component is something called a metadata file. And the funny thing is that metadata files are basically a repetition of the thing that I referred to earlier, the metadata that's actually in your JPEG. Now, it's a problem in the computer world that people often repeat the stuff that they have done in different sections. You could have NFTs that actually use the metadata in a particular JPEG, but the way it works at the moment is it has to be in a separate file. And this file has a known format, it's a standard, and it's called JSON, and it's a data format that produces files that can be read both by human beings and by computers. So when a human being opens up a metadata file in JSON format on their word processor or notepad or text editor, what they see is what looks a bit like a form. There'll be fields with names and then content for those fields. So it might say something like description and then a paragraph describing the artwork, artist, and then your name, and so on and so forth. For an NFT, the metadata has to contain a link to the image. That's what connects the metadata file to your artwork file. And that link could be a website address where your file is stored, or there is something called the Interplanetary File System, which is kind of a decentralized web that's not located just on one server somewhere under the control of one person. But we're getting a bit too technical here, so I'll just go back to the metadata file. It links to your artwork, and that's the thing that you need to know. Now, then we have the third part, and this is actually the NFT, and it lives on a blockchain. And the thing about a blockchain is that it's kind of a computer database that allows you to have ownership over bits and pieces in that database. So an NFT, I use an analogy to describe it, is a row in a database that says, here's a pointer to a file, and here's an address of somebody who owns this row in the database. So maybe that sounds a bit confusing, but what you've got to think of it is that it's kind of an object in the blockchain space, and it does two things. One, it has a clearly defined owner, which initially will be you, and two, it points to your metadata file. And then you have the three components of an NFT. You have the actual NFT on the blockchain, which you own, pointing to a metadata file, which describes a digital artwork out there on the internet, and the metadata links to the artwork itself. And the reason we have all these pieces is that then you can go to an NFT marketplace such as OpenSea or Rarible or Mintable. Those are the more well-known ones out there. And you can list the NFT because you own it. You can put it up for sale. And those sites can use the link in your NFT to the metadata file to fill in all the text describing your artwork, and they can go and retrieve the picture of your artwork, or maybe it's a sound file that they can play by hopping from your NFT to the metadata to your digital file. And that will then give you a web page with a listing saying, here is my NFT, it's for sale. Now, when you sell an NFT, what you're doing is you're taking payment in return for handing over the ownership for the NFT to somebody else. But you're not actually selling them anything to do with your artwork or with the metadata file pointing to the artwork. You're literally just selling them the entry on the blockchain that says who owns that entry on the blockchain. So it's kind of a funny thing to be selling, but apparently people like to buy them, sometimes for an awful lot of money. And that really is the three component parts of an NFT. And as I said, only one of them is actually a non-fungible token. The other two are your artwork and a file describing your artwork and where to find it. And that's it. So not nearly as complicated as you probably first thought when you saw it. So that's today's video on NFTs for content creators. I hope you found it interesting and useful, and I'll see you in the next episode soon. Bye for now.